Okay, I think we can start. Now we will listen talk from Adriana Villela, Principal Developer Advocate from Dynatrace, and Josh Lee, Developer Advocate from Altinity. Warm welcome, please.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Adriana.
I'm Josh.
And welcome to our talk. So you might be wondering what got us here. So it all started a few months ago. Josh wrote this LinkedIn post and he said, I still hear people saying that OpenTelemetry is vendor neutral, so you can switch vendors anytime you want to. And then it got me thinking, that's a really good point. So then I wrote a blog post in which I shared my thoughts on the topic. And then Josh and I got together and were like, hey, can we dig deeper into this? And well, it turns out we can, because that's why we're here. So today we are going to take you on a little journey. And it begins with standardization. And we like standardization because if you've been here long enough, you probably remember the days of switching cell phones. You remember every time you switched a cell phone, you would get a different charging cable, and it was so annoying. And even if it was the same cell phone manufacturer, right? We hated that. How about you, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I love USB-C, and I gotta turn this on. All right, I love, ooh. Thank you. I love USB-C, and it's a great standard. And I can even remember, right, like the transition from serial to USB, which was an awesome change for everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So in the spirit of talking about our favorite standards, we ask you, oh, come on, seriously, Slido? One sec. I had a Slido for this. Why is it not working? Hang on.
While we're figuring this out, shout out standards that you're grateful for.
Oh, yes. Yeah, why don't we do that? Because... yeah,
well,
we'll
YAML? Yes. YAML, yes, that's a great one.
Hang
Other
on.
standards that you're grateful for. ISO, yeah. Any others? I didn't hear that one? Yes. Standards are hard. Someone in the last time we did this talk said Big Macs was the standards they were grateful for. Okay. All right. So yeah, standards are awesome.
Standards are awesome. And I was going to say, you know, it's good that for us to share the standards that we're grateful for, because I'm from Canada, and we are celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving this coming weekend, which is different from American Thanksgiving, which is in November. Ours is in October, and we celebrate the harvest. So
not standard.
Not standard. So here's a standard that Josh and I are both grateful for. Oh, go away, evil Slido.
OpenTelemetry.
OpenTelemetry is a standard that we are super grateful for. And why is that, Josh?
Well, because of its openness, right? Yeah. Because of its vendor neutrality. So here we have kind of an example of OpenTelemetry architecture, right? And we can see the stuff in blue, right, is the stuff that OpenTelemetry covers for you. A lot of this stuff used to be dealt with by vendors, right? Vendors had to provide all of this. And now all the stuff in blue is an open standard. I think that's pretty awesome. It gives us a lot of flexibility that we're going to dive into.
Absolutely. So yeah, we're gonna dig into some of the meaty bits so that you know what you're getting into when you are switching vendors for as an OpenTelemetry user.
Yeah.
And with that, I guess we should introduce ourselves properly. Oh yes.
I just one quick thing, right? The standards extend as far as the blue, but the topic of this talk, right, is the hard truth. So there's no standards yet in the yellow, at least from the OpenTelemetry project, and that's going to be part of what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
That's true. So prepare to be wowed and amazed. Okay, so allow us to introduce ourselves properly. My name is Adriana Villela. I am a Brazilian living in Canada. I am a CNCF ambassador, blogger, podcaster, and I am one of the maintainers of the OTel end user SIG. By day, I am a principal developer advocate at Dynatrace, focusing on observability with OpenTelemetry. And by night, I like to climb walls. I am an avid boulderer. And I also love capybaras because they make me happy.
That is, yes, that's great. I am Josh Lee. I do my best to keep up with Adriana, whether it's blogging or podcasting or rock climbing. And I am an open source advocate at Altinity, which means that I talk about open source technologies and I advocate for them, things like Kubernetes, ClickHouse, and OpenTelemetry. And I like to say that I am just technical enough to get myself into trouble. So a quick agenda, and then we'll dive into the meat and potatoes. So I like to start with why. Why does OpenTelemetry exist? How did we get here? What actually is neutral in the OpenTelemetry project? What kind of things can we do with that neutrality? What isn't neutral, and why switching vendors might not be as pain-free as we all think? And what could we do to make this better or different in the future? And then finally, like, OTel is awesome. Adriana and I met because we both love OTel. And so we're going to finish with why we think OTel is so successful and maybe some lessons that other projects could take from that. So why does OpenTelemetry exist? Well, in my opinion, OpenTelemetry exists because of distributed tracing. Right? Before distributed tracing, we kind of had good enough open standards. Right? So first of all, observability, in my opinion, begs to be open. If it's not open, you can't get to, it's so much harder to get to that 100% coverage, right? Which is so important in observability to actually have end-to-end coverage. And if you're depending on a vendor to make changes for you, you can't do it yourself, right? Like you can with open source tools. So observability begs to be open because it has to integrate with, I think I saw that Datadog has 1,000 integrations now. So like that's a lot of work for one company to do. Now that work can be spread across the entire industry and individuals can instrument the specific things that they care about. That's awesome, but why did we need OpenTelemetry for that? I mean, before OpenTelemetry, we did logging we needed OpenTelemetry because of distributed computing, right? So in the old way, we would have logging and metrics, and like a log would kind of have the complete stack trace of all of the information that we need from a single service, and that was great. And those were kind of de facto open standards, right? Like a log is just text, and it only concerns itself with the service that's emitting the log or the process that's emitting the log. Metrics, again, it's just a number and some text labels, and they only concern themselves with the thing that's emitting them. With distributed computing, we need a little bit of context. We need a little bit of shared context between the different services, which means we need some kind of standard for communicating that context. And all of a sudden, the Java developers have to care about what the Python developers are doing and vice versa. So it gets a lot more complicated, right? So originally, that complication was solved by the vendors, and we're very grateful to them for doing that. But it didn't have that openness, right? And that openness is so important to observability. And in my mind, that's really why OpenTelemetry exists, is because we needed an open standard for distributed tracing.
And speaking of that vendor neutrality and open standard, what exactly makes OpenTelemetry vendor neutral? At its core, it simply means that you don't have to re-instrument your code again if you decide to switch vendors, which is a huge deal because in the before times, if you hated your vendor, then tough luck, you were stuck with them for life because the amount of effort required to re-instrument your code to switch vendors, because each vendor had their own instrumentation libraries. So it meant that you had to go and change your code. So you're basically reintroducing new technical debt into your code, and nobody loves that. So, but what makes specifically OpenTelemetry vendor neutral? Let's look at the bits of it. So first of all, we have, why is my clicker not working?
Here, I got you. Oh, mine's not working either. Did we maybe select the wrong window?
Oh, you know, no, it's because my, this is the day of ad-libbing. No, it's because I had a pop-up from my computer telling me it was
security
time
warning.
to reboot.
Security warning.
No, you haven't rebooted your computer in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Oops. Okay. Here we go. So the OTel components. We have semantic conventions. We have the API and SDK. We have OTLP. And finally, we have the OTel collector. And I'll dig into each of these. Let's start with semantic conventions. You can think of semantic conventions as standard labels, which is great because we should be able to talk the same language across our traces. And we use this very lovely picture of food nutrition labels because that's something that's standard. And as you notice here, all these products are different, but they have a very standardized label so that we know exactly what we are getting. The next, do you have anything that
Oh,
you
no,
wanna
that's
add?
exactly it, right? We need to use the same words to describe the same things, even across different contexts.
Exactly. Next, we have the OpenTelemetry API, or Application Programming Interface. And the OTel API is basically the entry point into instrumentation for your application or even your infrastructure. And the thing about the OTel API is that it defines the methods for instrumentation. So it defines the what. And the API, because we are dealing with multiple languages supported by OpenTelemetry, each language has its own API.
Yeah, it's the buttons that you push to make telemetry.
The next component is the OTel SDK, or Software Development Kit. And the SDK implements the API. So if the API is the what, the SDK is the how. And the cool thing about the SDK is, as long as it implements the API, it doesn't matter which SDK you're using. You can swap it out. So you can use the OTel Upstream SDK, or maybe your vendor has an SDK that you prefer, or you're like, forget it. I want to write my own SDK. As long as it implements the API, no problem, your code will not break. Or maybe you're not ready to commit. It's a big decision after all. So you can wait, because the API has a base implementation of the SDK, which means that if you're not ready to pick an SDK, your code's not going to break. The only thing is that it's not going to send any telemetry to your backend.
Right, but that's really useful if you're, say, making a library, because your library can make API calls without worrying about which SDK the user is going to plug in. And as a user, you don't really need to think too much about how the SDK works, because most of the time, I would say use the standard SDK and use the standard configuration, right? Use the OTLP standard exporter. It's awesome.
Oh, and that brings us to our next component, which is actually our favorite component of OpenTelemetry, which is OTLP, the OpenTelemetry protocol. It is the unsung hero of OpenTelemetry. And I'd say we both agree it's the secret sauce of OpenTelemetry, because really, if we've got the semantic conventions, which are our standardized labels. We've got the API, which is our what. The SDK is our how. The OTLP is basically the data format in which you're transporting all this data. And the interesting thing about OTLP is that when OpenTelemetry first started, the various observability backends did not support ingesting OTLP natively, so each one of them had exporters that converted from OTLP to that vendor's native format. But as OpenTelemetry became more popular, now you see most of the major observability backends actually supporting OTLP native data ingest, including Prometheus and Jaeger.
Yeah, that's cool. That's even the open source, right, is all coming together.
And then finally, we have our second favorite component of OpenTelemetry, the Swiss Army knife of OpenTelemetry, as it is commonly known, and this is my Swiss Army knife. It is the OpenTelemetry collector, which is a vendor-neutral binary for ingesting, transforming, and exporting your data. And the transformations are endless. You can filter data, you can add and remove data, you can mask your data, you can batch your data. And the cool thing about the collector is that it decouples the source of your telemetry from the destination. It allows you to ingest data from multiple sources, whether it's applications written in multiple languages or various types of infrastructure. And it has that multicast capability, which makes it the ultimate companion to OpenTelemetry and gives us interoperability.
Yes. So interoperability, this is my favorite part of these open standards, right? So I often hear vendor neutrality referred to as the thing that's going to save you on the day that you decide to switch vendors, which is true. It will help with that. But I think that there are benefits that we can get like every single day leading up to that day, should that day ever even come, right? It's that we can use all of the tools together all of the time. That's awesome. It means we get choices, right? We can use everything together. We don't have to limit ourselves. Really, it means, right, we can have our cake and eat it too.
Yummy.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think this leads us to some lovely examples. In case you're wondering, well, what the hell do you mean by that? Don't worry, we got you covered.
Yeah, we're going to dive in. So first, basic example, right? Very commonly, you would be using maybe an open source stack with an open source tool for each one of the specific signals. You've got something for your traces, something for your logs, and something for your metrics, and the collector is going to send each signal to the appropriate backend. This is a very, very common and great use for the OTel collector.
Or if you like all of your signals in one observability backend, If your observability backend supports it, you can send them all to one single place, which is amazing. But what if you're not sure which one you want to send it to? No problem, because the OTel collector's multicast capabilities allow you to send to one or more backends at the same time, so that you can compare vendors a la bake-off style.
Yeah. So that would be that switching vendors use case, which is awesome. We also do something like more permanent, right? So a very common need that I see is you have maybe some legal requirement to keep all of your logs for 7 years. You want to send all of those to your observability vendor, it's probably going to be expensive and kind of unnecessary, right? Because you're not doing a lot of analysis on those logs. So maybe you want to do something like this, where you get all of the benefits of your observability vendor, sending all of your recent telemetry there, and also fork off all of your logs to some cheaper on-premise storage or object storage in the cloud or on your private cloud that you can keep for a very long time. Or another use case for this type of forking would be that you have an observability vendor that you love and you don't want to switch, but they're missing maybe a feature that you really need. Like profiling is a brand new thing that you can do with OpenTelemetry with open source tools. Well, using the OTel collector, you could hook up a profiling tool like Periscope and keep using your observability vendor for everything else.
And then finally, perhaps your company has a mandated observability backend that they would like everyone to use for troubleshooting stuff in prod, and you're like, ugh, Rumble, just fine, you can use that. But what about our lovely developers who, they're told like, yeah, this is used for production, but we don't have a license for you for dev. But I mean, you've instrumented the code. You want to be able to use OpenTelemetry to troubleshoot your own code, which you absolutely should do, everyone. In which case, hey, thankfully, we have so many open source options that you can spin up a bunch of open source tools, on your desktop and run that on your own. And then we have another use case too, right?
So you could even, I see this often, right? Your company has acquired another company and they're still using a different observability tool and they want to keep using it, or they're going to need some time to transition off of it. Well, you can do that too.
Give them time to fight over it to see which one wins.
Yeah. Give everyone boxing gloves.
So that's all well and good, but what about what we're here to talk about, which is, OpenTelemetry is vendor neutral up until a point, because even if you hate your vendor, in the before times, it was super hard to switch vendors. What about now, right? You don't have to re-instrument your code. What about when you switch vendors? Well, this is a know before you switch kind of discussion. And there are a few things that you have to know before you're switching vendors. First of all, we gotta
lift and shift. Hey, Adriana, we're just gonna switch vendors, okay? Please just put all of it over here, and we're gonna be done like next week, right? You can do it in this sprint.
No problem. By the way, these are all my toys from when I was growing up. Little 80s kid. Woo. But for real, these are the repercussions. First of all, you switch vendors, right? OpenTelemetry is vendor neutral up until data ingest, right? Because everyone ingests the same data. But what happens when the data is inside that observability backend? Well, first of all, oh my God, you switch vendors. It has a new look and feel. Surprise, surprise. Of course that's going to happen, because if all the vendors look the same, you probably wouldn't be switching. Secondly, storage and historical data. That's something that we probably don't talk about enough, right? Because you switch backends, but you've got all this historical data from before. And if you have compliance issues or compliance requirements where you have to keep your data for a certain amount of time, what happens? Are you able to export it from that backend? Usually not. So when you're switching backends, it might be that you're stuck with your old backend, at least until your compliance period ends, which could be a while. And then when you do switch, you should also consider one of the use cases that we mentioned, where we basically send the data to an internal data store running on your private cloud at the same time. So you're just dumping all your data there, and then you can do whatever with it afterwards if you need it, right?
Yeah, but you're paying for 2 cakes.
You are, yeah. You're paying for a lot of cakes.
Yeah.
That's the only thing. But these are things you have to consider. And then finally, queries and dashboards, because guess what? Each vendor has their own dashboarding look and feel. And guess what? They'll have their own query language, right? Not everyone runs on PromQL. They have their own proprietary query language where they're like, my query language is the best. And maybe it might be, but it means you have to learn some new stuff. We also have alerts and SLOs. And by the way, that's me in the ghost face mask holding a rubber chicken. So alerts and SLOs, you define them in your previous backend. You define them in your previous backend, and guess what? You're going to have to redefine them. Or if your backend doesn't support defining alerts and SLOs, we'll have to delve into that other use case that Josh mentioned, where you're also going to have to set up like a new vendor specifically for dealing with SLOs, in which case you're going to be having to send your metrics to them, right?
Yep.
And then finally, infrastructure as code. Isn't it nice that that most of the observability backends provide Terraform providers so that we can automate all these lovely things, including dashboard creation? But when you switch vendors, guess what? You're going to have to rewrite all of that lovely Terraform code because it's not a lift and shift. Right? So then that means rewriting all the code for your dashboards and your queries and whatever else that was provided. So there might be stuff that was provided by your Terraform provider from your old vendor that's not provided by your new vendor, in which case you're like, oops, yes, that's not happening. So these are things to keep in mind. We're not saying don't switch vendors, but like know before you get into it, because there are kind of these hidden costs, right, that we don't think about.
It's harder than you think. No, even harder than that.
Yeah.
More. Okay. But I am optimistic, right? I think there is a possibility for change. So what if we could maybe open up the back end a little bit, right? So if we look back at this diagram, I said that yellow section is not vendor neutral, at least as far as OpenTelemetry is concerned. But there are actually a lot of open standards and open source tools that fall into that bucket. And actually, a lot of those tools are used by the vendors already under the hood. They're just not exposing them to us as end users. So here are some of these tools. These are some of my favorites and some of the most popular. And you can certainly cobble together your own observability platform using these tools. Maybe consider if you have the engineering muscle in your organization to do that. But also, as I said, the vendors are all using these tools under the hood. So here we have data stores, right? We have query languages that are standard. I want to call out Lucene specifically as one that probably all of you have used at some point because it was embedded in a tool that you were using and you didn't even realize it. Postgres is awesome. It's not purpose-built for observability, but there's a ton of extensions that are making it more observability compatible. And I think SQL-based observability is really, really exciting because it can be much more expressive than PromQL. And then we have all the open source visualization tools, right? Purses is a really exciting one that is under a license that allows it to be embedded in vendor products. So if multiple vendors are embedding Purses as their dashboarding tool, all of a sudden we do have vendor neutral dashboards that could be exported in and imported. And that's all based around, right, having a shared query language and that shared API on our events, right? The semantic conventions basically give us an API that we could reuse across vendors. They all have the same data. So now this sharing is kind of possible. And here's a quick example of a Lucene query. So if you didn't believe me, you've seen this before, right? So that's cool. And here's kind of what I'm talking about with that shared API, right? So we could have the vendors opening up that storage or providing an API where we could directly access it. I now work a lot with data lakes, which kind of have this multi-access model where you have different use cases consuming the same data. And I think that's really, really awesome. And it also saves a lot of money when you only have to store the data once.
And this brings us to, when everything's said and done, what is it that makes, with everything that we've discussed, OpenTelemetry ultimately is still very successful, right? Because of things that we will discuss very shortly. But first, we're going to leave you with this.
To underscore the point of how successful OpenTelemetry is, right? It's the counterpoint to this comic, and we don't see that often in our lifetimes. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, exactly, because there is standards fatigue for sure.
Yeah. Yes.
It started in 2019. I want to say Traces went in GA in 2021, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And then metrics followed, I think, the next year, and then logs, and then I think profiling in the last couple of years. So
Between like 2, depending on how you're looking at it and how early of an adopter you are, anywhere from like 2 to 5 years.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an easy journey.
But this is a good time to adopt, honestly, because it's in a really good space. But why is OpenTelemetry successful? Well, first of all, it is an open standard, and in being an open standard, it means that everyone can contribute to improving that standard, which is great, because before, when each vendor had its own instrumentation library, that means that the scope of innovation was limited to that vendor. Now you've opened it to an entire community, not only of vendors that support it, but also community members, which is amazing.
Yeah. And that cooperation is beautiful, right? Like my first contributions to the project were fostered by actually Giuliano, who's sitting right there. And like he was working at a competitor of the company that I was working at the time, but we had the same goal of this openness, right? And this 100% coverage and making the project successful. And I consider many, many past and current and future competitors to be some of my closest friends. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we even met because of OpenTelemetry, because you attended a session from the OTel end user SIG where we were talking about writing successful CFPs. So.
Yeah.
And then finally, we have stewardship. OpenTelemetry is under the CNCF. And OpenTelemetry, for those who weren't aware, is the second largest CNCF project behind Kubernetes, which is huge considering it started in 2019. And it's got that same kind of community support as Kubernetes, where it's multiple vendors coming together to work together as friends. Yes, we're competitors in real life, but honestly, when it comes to working in OpenTelemetry, we're all friends and we're all working towards the same goal. And OpenTelemetry has been very deliberate about making sure that not any single vendor takes the spotlight, which is huge. So it's not, a show about vendor A above all else.
All right, so what do we actually get out of this, right? Like that's all nice, but like how does this tangibly make your job easier? Well, you get portability, you do get the opportunity to change vendors, and if you do decide to do that, now that we have these open SDKs, the blast radius is dramatically smaller than it used to be. It's still going to be painful, as we've talked about, but it's possible. And you get interoperability, right? We've talked about why this is our favorite part. It's because you can use all of the best tools all of the time. Everybody gets to use what they want. That's awesome.
And that gives us choice, which means that you have the flexibility to mix and match like we saw with those various use cases. And that is very, very powerful, because that is not something that you could do before. Our developer who wanted to, make sure that that they could debug their code using a different tool than the corporate standard could never have done that before. So they were either screwed or have to beg, corporate to say, please get me a license too. And as a result, it allows us to ask meaningful questions.
Oops.
We hit it at the same time.
Yep.
Damn it.
Get useful answers.
And
take action.
And with that, we will leave you with some references and shameless self-promotions. I've included a link to Josh's original LinkedIn post, a link to my blog post in response to Josh's LinkedIn post, very meta. I've also included a link to my podcast called Geeking Out, and as you notice, the logo includes a capybara, which was designed by my 17-year-old daughter. And I've had some really cool guests on there, including a number of members from Cloud Native, including Kat Cosgrove. I've had Abby Banks or Liz Fong Jones, and I'd say my highest profile guests have included Kelsey Hightower, and recently, last month, I interviewed Scott Hanselman, so stay tuned.
That's awesome.
Oh, and Josh is going to be on there soon.
Yeah. I'm not that famous, but I'm excited. And then I have a podcast that I've just started, Unevenly Distributed. It focuses on data lakes, so not so related to observability, but some great content. And check it out.
Cool. And that is it.
Yeah.
And sorry, this was meant to be in Polish, but I think we did a copy pasta from our...
Oh, we did. Yep. Oops. Last minute tweaks.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Time for Q&A. Is anybody having any questions? Hey.
So I've got a question about more practical. Let's say I have an example, a use case that right now I have a, let's say, Kubernetes cluster with metrics from Prometheus stack and logs taken by FluentBit stuff and all this stuff. As you can understand, there are two separate systems. If I understand correctly, I can use OTel stack to have it in one place.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we didn't really show that, but absolutely one of my favorite things about the OTel collector is it's like 90 plus receivers. And so you can use the OTel collector as a node agent, or if you're already using, I think you mentioned FluentBit, right? You can keep using that. And if you want to like create standardization, you could deploy an OTel collector as a gateway, right? And basically use it to standardize everything before it hits your backend.
Awesome.
And it can absolutely ingest FluentBit.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah. Just like poke me if you want to.
All right, thank you. Adriana and Josh, great presentation.
Yeah.
So awesome. I'm Pedro, I'm with Pega. And my question is pretty simple. As one of the companies adopting OTel standards very, very recently, I would like to ask your opinion for where should we start to get deeper into it? Like, what are the best learning paths? I know there's a, how is it called? Oh my goodness, I forgot. There's XM? Yeah? The certification, it ran out of my mind. There's also learning paths from different vendors, but maybe there's some Git repos to get in action or something that is not obvious.
Are you familiar with the OTel demo project?
No.
The OTel demo project. That would be my first recommendation. And then my second recommendation, the maintainer sitting right behind you. I would also say, right, like the end user SIG, another maintainer.
And we have actually the end user SIG has an OTel for beginners video on the OpenTelemetry YouTube. The YouTube channel is called OTel-official, and you should see it on there. So that's another great spot.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
You mentioned Persis for dashboard.
Yeah.
Do you think that will become a standard on the vendors? It's a hot or a spicy question, but yeah.
I don't know, right? Like I used to be a product manager for dashboards, and there's a lot of there are a lot of different ways to kind of think about how dashboards are created and built, and like I think everyone kind of has their own take on it, and maybe they would be hesitant to adopt something that is just like completely removes a differentiator for their product. But I also do kind of like the idea that you could just export and import your dashboards and like, yeah, I don't know. I've seen a few vendors adopt it so far. Remains to be seen if the larger ones are willing to do that or if they want to maintain it as a differentiator. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that covers it quite nicely.
Yeah.
Okay, one more.
We're popular today.
Yeah, love it.
Thank you.
If there's open spaces, we'll do we'll do one of those.
Thank you for the presentation. You said that OpenTelemetry is good for every observability signal, such as metrics, logs, and traces, and profiles, probably. From my experience, it is good for logs, it is good for traces, because it's originally created for traces, and logs also some kind of traces. And but for metrics, it is not so good compared to Prometheus text exposition format. Before OpenTelemetry has been appeared, the industry standard was Prometheus text exposition format for metrics exposition, for metrics transport. And metrics exposition format for Prometheus was much easier to understand, much easier to deal with, to debug with, and it had much lower overhead compared to OpenTelemetry for metrics. And my question is, do you have some initiatives to use this Prometheus text exposition format instead of this overcomplicated format which you promote for OpenTelemetry?
In my own home lab, I'm using the Prometheus exporter, but I'm using the OTel collector as the scraper. So I'm using Prometheus exposition format, as you say. I love it. It's a great format. There are exporters for freaking everything. But I don't like running the Prometheus agent or the Prometheus server, so I use OTel and a different backend for storing the metrics.
And the OTel collector also has this component called the OTel operator, which basically it allows you to It allows you to do scaling, like sharding for Prometheus targets, and it also does service discovery for Pod Monitor and Service Monitor. So it gives you, I'd say, a few. It ends up like being convenient because it's like your one-stop shop for ingesting Prometheus metrics. And then, as Josh said, I mean, if you really want, and so you don't have to run Prometheus, but you can still then ultimately export those Prometheus metrics.
Yeah.
So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
Last question.
Less of a question, but more of a comment. But what you mentioned about OpenTelemetry, I think one thing that has opened up is the innovative aspect of it, like the fact that it opened it up. So I see a lot of new startups springing up and people trying to build on top of OpenTelemetry. Something that was a little bit difficult, I think, in the past because the barrier for entry was pretty high. But I think with OpenTelemetry that has opened up tremendously. So we will see a lot more innovation in the observability space in the next couple of years because of OpenTelemetry.
I call it the observability Cambrian explosion that we've seen in the last few years. It's really impressive.
Yeah, and you see a lot of observability adjacent tooling, right? You've got BindPlane that does like the management of fleets of collectors, and then you've got Oligarden that looks at the quality of your instrumentation. So I think we're going to see more of that coming onto the scene too. Not just more observability vendors coming in, but like OTel adjacent products to kind of make things a little bit easier.
Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Adriana, especially for sharing your personal photos during the presentation. It was really fun. And now, big applause for them once again.